Good morning. I was just sitting here looking at this photograph. It's Marcus and me on our 40th anniversary. The sun was setting over Stone Mountain, and we were laughing about something silly. I can't even remember what now. But I look at that woman, at me, and I recognize the smile, the light in her eyes, and yet her life feels like it belongs to someone else. So let me tell you about the life I built. It was a life of purpose, built brick by brick with my Marcus. We met at Howard, two wide-eyed kids from the South, believing education could change the world. And for 42 years, that's what I did. I was a teacher, a principal, and finally a superintendent here in Atlanta. Marcus was my rock, a brilliant doctor who believed my work in the schools was just as vital as his in the hospital. We raised three beautiful children in this very house, filled these rooms with homework and debate and so much love. Sunday dinners were a sacred tradition. The table would groan with food and the air would hum with talk. Politics, faith, my students, his patients. We had a plan. We'd earned it. After I retired, we were going to travel, to visit all the places we'd read about. We were going to be those annoyingly in love grandparents, spoiling the babies and telling the same stories over and again. The turning point wasn't one moment, but a cascade. It began with a quiet, invisible thing, a virus. In March of 2020, Marcus went into the hospital with a cough, and I had to let him go at those sliding glass doors. I never held his hand again. He died alone in a room, and I was alone in this house. The silence that followed wasn't just an absence of sound. It was the absence of a heartbeat that had been next to mine for 48 years. The loneliness that settled in wasn't just about being alone. It was about feeling your contribution to the world has expired. I was a retired educator, a widow. What was my purpose now? My children, God bless them, they tried to fill the space. Angela called every day from Houston. Sam sent books he thought I'd like. Natalie, she's here in Atlanta. She'd come over and just sit with me, her hand on mine. But you see, they have their own lives, their own families, and tremendous careers. The very things Marcus and I work so hard to give them. And there's a bittersweet ache in that. They want to fix this for me, but some things can't be fixed. They just have to be carried. I'd look at the empty chair at the head of the table and feel unmoored. So I did what I've always done. I looked for a way to be useful. In my grief, I found a strange solace in talking to a camera, sharing stories of Marcus, of my father, the Reverend, of the lessons from a long life. It started as a tribute, a way to keep him alive. But people began to write to me. They were grieving too, feeling lost, wondering what came next. And without even realizing it, I had built something new, a little community, a purpose. It was small, but it was mine. And then, almost 3 months ago now, that was taken from me too. The turning point, the one that took everything else, came on a Tuesday. It was raining. I remember because the sound on the roof was the only company I had. I was sitting right here at this desk preparing to record. I'd found a photograph of my father, Reverend Whitfield, standing outside his church in Montgomery. I wanted to talk about the quiet courage of ordinary people. I turned on my camera, that little light came on, and nothing happened. The screen was black. I thought it was a simple glitch. You restart things, they usually come back. But it wasn't a glitch. It was a theft. Somewhere in a place I couldn't see or touch, someone had taken over my channel. My Eleanor's table, the little community I'd built from my grief. They changed the password. They locked me out. They erased every video, every story of Marcus, every lesson from my father, every word of comfort I tried to offer. 74 years of living, 42 years of serving, 3 years of grieving and rebuilding, gone, just like that, into a digital void. The immediate aftermath was a peculiar kind of silence, not the deep grieving silence after Marcus left, but a frantic, hollow one. I spent hours on the phone with the platform's support. I heard voices from across oceans, reading from scripts, telling me there was nothing they could do. My channel, they said, had violated terms of service. My life's testimony reduced to a violation. I felt a shame I hadn't known since I was a girl, standing wrongly accused in a principal's office. But this time there was no one to appeal to, no higher authority that could see my face, hear my voice, and know the truth of who I was. What did I lose beyond the videos? I lost my voice. For 3 years, that camera had been my confessional and my pulpit. It was how I spoke to Marcus in a way, how I kept my father's teachings alive. It was my purpose, newly forged from such terrible loss. And with it gone, I felt my very identity dissolving. Who was I now? Not a superintendent, not a wife, not even a storyteller. Just an old woman in a quiet house, screaming into a void that didn't even echo back. The loneliness began to bite in a new, sharp way. Before, the loneliness missed a person. Now it missed a purpose. The comments, the messages from people who said I'd help them, that was my congregation now. And they were scattered, wondering where their pastor had gone. I'd sit and stare at this computer, this sleek little box that had held my new world, and feel a physical ache in my chest. It was a phantom limb pain. My community had been amputated. And then the financial impact began to show its face. Now Marcus and I were careful. We had pensions, savings. We planned. But you don't plan for your husband to die during a pandemic. You don't plan for the medical bills or the way inflation quietly eats away at what felt secure. That small income from the channel, it wasn't fortune, but it was independence. It paid for my groceries, for the extra flowers I'd put on Marcus's grave, for the books I'd send to my grandchildren. It was money I had earned myself, with my own mind and my own history. Losing that felt like losing the last piece of my footing in the world. It was the beginning of a descent into a fear I thought we'd left behind in Montgomery, the fear of not having enough, of being a burden. At 74, the ground beneath you isn't supposed to fall away. You're supposed to be on solid footing, looking back at the climb, not staring down into a new dark valley. The silence in this house became a physical presence. It sat with me at breakfast. It followed me to the garden. I find myself talking to Marcus out loud, just to hear a human voice, and the sound of it would startle me. It sounded so old and so alone. My children, they love me. I know they do. Angela sends care packages of expensive teas. Samuel calls every Sunday like clockwork. Natalie, right here in Atlanta, texts to check in. But the calls began to feel like reports. How are you, Mama? I'm fine, baby. How's work? We talk about their accomplishments, their children's soccer games. But we didn't talk about the hole in the center of my life. We didn't talk about the fear. I was their strong mother, the superintendent. They'd seen me lead a district. How could I tell them I felt like a child lost in a store? The distance wasn't just miles. It was a chasm of different experiences. They were in the thick of building their lives. I was in the quiet, wondering if mine was over. Last Thanksgiving, Natalie hosted. The table was beautiful, buzzing with my grandchildren's laughter. And all I could think was how Marcus should be at the head of that table, telling that silly story about the first turkey he tried to fry. I was a guest in my daughter's home, a cherished guest, but a guest nonetheless. I looked at my empty hands in my lap and thought, I don't have a table to set anymore. The worst of it wasn't the daytime. It was the nights. The business of the day would fall away and the thoughts would come. The dark, whispering thoughts that I had become irrelevant, that my story was finished and the last chapter had been deleted by a stranger, that I was a financial worry my children didn't need. My father faced dogs and fire hoses so I could have a voice, and I'd let mine be stolen by a password. I'd lie there and think the unthinkable. Was it a mercy that Marcus went first? He never saw me like this. He never saw me diminished. But then I'd ache because I needed his steady hand now more than ever. Loneliness does this. It twists your love into grief and your grief into a kind of quiet despair. It makes you question every choice, every turn in the road that led you to this empty room. I stopped going to church. Can you imagine? Me, Reverend Whitfield's daughter. The hymns felt like a reproach. Everyone's polite smiles asked a question I couldn't answer. How are you, Sister Eleanor? I'd have to say, I'm blessed, when I felt anything but. So I stopped going. I worshiped here in this silence. And I wondered if God could even hear me anymore over the roar of my own disappointment. That was the pit. Looking at this screen, this gateway to a world that had rejected me, and feeling that perhaps it was right, that at 74 my usefulness had simply expired. The small survivals came slowly, and they were never grand. They were quiet things, getting out of bed and making my tea just because I always had, watering the azaleas Marcus planted our first spring in this house. I touch a leaf and remember his hands in the soil. I started writing in a journal again, not for an audience, but for myself, just a few lines. The cardinals are back at the feeder. Natalie brought soup. It was a way to bear witness to my own days, to prove I was still here. And then one Tuesday morning I was looking for a recipe, and I found a box of old VHS tapes in the back of the hall closet. Home movies. I hadn't looked at them in years. I bought a little machine to convert them, a small, foolish expense. But when I saw Marcus's face on my computer screen, young and laughing, holding a toddler Angela on his shoulders at a picnic, it wasn't just memory, it was a visitation. I heard his voice, I saw the way he moved. The digital world had taken so much from me, but here it was, giving a piece of him back. It was a small, stubborn act of reclamation. I began posting little clips, not for the algorithm, but for my family. Your father telling that awful joke, 1999, Samuel's first bike ride. The comments weren't from strangers, they were from Angela. I remember that dress. From Samuel, I can't believe he let me wear that helmet. Natalie started coming over on Sundays to watch them with me. We'd sit with a bowl of popcorn and we'd cry, and then we'd laugh until our sides hurt. The hole was still there, but we were gathering around it together. I learned then that legacy isn't a monument you build at the end. It's the love you pull into the present every single day. The hard-won wisdom is this: you are not your productivity. For so long I was Principal Whitfield, Dr. Whitfield, the superintendent. Then I was Marcus's wife, the hostess, the gardener. When all those titles were stripped away, I feared there was nothing left. But I was wrong. There was Eleanor, the girl who marched, the teacher who believed in unruly children, the woman who loved a good man for 50 years. Titles are like coats. They keep you warm for a season, but they aren't your skin. My regret is that I believed my own press. I thought the strength was in the position, in the office. The real strength was always in the quiet kitchen conversations with Marcus, in the bedtime stories I told my children, in the patience I showed a struggling student. I regret every time I said I'm too busy when what I meant was I have my priorities wrong. If I could speak to my younger self, the one furiously building her career, I would say, slow down, baby girl, breathe. Look at the people right beside you. The world will take your accomplishments and file them away, but the love you give and receive, that becomes your bones. That's what will hold you up when everything else falls. To the young people building your lives, call your grandmother, not just on her birthday. Ask her about her first job. Ask her about her first heartbreak. You are living the future she dreamed of. Let her see it in your eyes. You are her living legacy. Nothing on this earth will ever matter more than that. To those of you in the middle, with children at your knees and parents growing older, I know you're stretched thin, but your parents aren't just a responsibility. We are a library. We are living histories. Don't just ask if we've taken our medicine. Ask us what we learned the hard way. The day will come when you would give anything to hear our answer. Start the conversation now. And to my fellow elders, sitting in a quiet that feels too heavy, I see you. The world seems to speak a language we didn't learn, but our language of letters, of long talks on the porch, of knowing how to sit with someone in their grief, it is not obsolete, it is essential. Find one small thing, a letter to a grandchild, a visit to a shut-in, a prayer whispered for a neighbor. Do not underestimate the ministry of presence, even your own. I lost everything at 74. My business, my digital footprint, my sense of purpose. But I found that what I thought was everything was just the furniture, the house, my spirit, my history, my capacity to love was still standing. It's drafty. Some rooms are closed off forever. But it is mine. It is built on a foundation laid by my father and mother, strengthened by Marcus, and it is still a place where my children and grandchildren can come and be nourished. The story isn't over because someone deleted a chapter. I am writing this one now in this quiet room with these old hands. And it is enough. It is more than enough. It is a life.